Reports suggest some 500 North Korean soldiers have been killed in Russia's Kursk region as a result of the recent Ukrainian offensive using UK-supplied Storm Shadow missiles. South Korea and Malaysia established a strategic partnership for broader cooperation in the defense industry and key minerals as their leaders meet in the South Korean capital. South Korea hosts the UN's intergovernmental negotiations in Busan to work on a plastic reduction treaty, the consensus of which could be challenging. Tonight, we take a look at what citizens and activists alike are demanding. It's November 25th, 8 p.m. in Seoul. This is Newscenter. Thank you for joining us. I'm Yoon Jung-min. We start with reports suggesting hundreds of North Korean casualties on the war front in Russia. Kim Jong-sil has responses here in the nation and more.
Seoul has reaffirmed its firm stance while also expressing concerns on the growing military and economic cooperation between Moscow and Pyongyang.
The government has repeatedly expressed its firm stance on the growing military and economic cooperation between Russia and North Korea. Moving forward, we will closely monitor developments in their military cooperation and take phased measures accordingly.
The Ministry of Unification urged North Korea and Russia to comply with UN Security Council resolutions, calling for immediate halt to any actions that violate them. South Korea's NIS reported receiving specific intelligence on North Korean casualties in Russia, with investigations underway. Meanwhile, Ukraine's RBC reported that over 11,000 North Korean troops are stationed in Russia's Kursk region, with many already involved in the conflict alongside Russian forces. This follows reports of about 500 North Korean soldiers killed in last week's Ukrainian attacks on Russia, which reportedly involved UK-supplied Storm Shadow missiles.
The Trump administration's second term may concentrate on ending the war in Ukraine. While we should be concerned about North Korean casualties, refraining from sending weapons or investigators aligns better with our national interests.
Russia has previously warned Seoul against supplying lethal weapons to Ukraine. While South Korea has long refrained, President Yoon Suk-yeol recently suggested that this option may not be ruled out.
If this were Europe, lethal weapon support might be justifiable. However, on the peaceful Korean peninsula, this poses a serious risk. Besides, the Trump administration won't necessarily align fully with Russia's interests.
Professor Chung emphasized that any U.S. policy shift may push South Korea to take a more cautious approach. Kim Jong-sil, Arirang News.
In the U.S., the incoming Trump administration is reportedly looking to restore peace in Ukraine, as it says it's much concerned about the latest escalation in conflict between Kyiv and the Kremlin. Lee Jae-myung tells us more.
Speaking to Fox News on Sunday, President-elect Donald Trump's pick for a top security advisor said Trump is incredibly concerned about the escalation of war between Ukraine and Russia. According to Mike Waltz, Trump is concerned that the deployment of North Korean troops to the Kursk region and Ukraine's use of long-range missiles will further escalate the war. He also noted that South Korea is considering an intervention, stressing that it's another sign that the war is escalating. Waltz also echoed Trump's call to end the war as soon as possible. According to the National Security Advisor nominee, the international community needs to restore deterrence, restore peace, and get ahead of the escalation rather than responding to it. He also called on both Russia and Ukraine to come to the negotiating table to finally put an end to the war. Waltz also vowed to work with the Biden administration in trying to find a solution to the nearly 2-year-long war. Waltz is known as a foreign policy hawk and has been critical of Russia. However, just like Trump, he has opposed increasing aid to Ukraine. Lee Jae-myung, Arirang News.
An Israeli air assault on a military facility in the town of Al Amirian in southern Lebanon this past Sunday killed at least one Lebanese soldier and injured 18 others. In a statement on social media, the Lebanese military said the assault had caused substantial structural damage as well. Israeli authorities, for their part, are reportedly investigating the incident, adding that the assault took place in an area of active fighting against Hezbollah militants and that their military cooperation is only targeted at these militants. More than 40 Lebanese soldiers have been killed since the start of the armed confrontation between Israel and Hezbollah. Accordingly, Lebanon's caretaker Prime Minister Najib Mikati denounced the latest attack, calling it a message rejecting all efforts to end the war. The Republic of Korea Air Force kicked off its large-scale aerial combat exercise, dubbed Soaring Eagle, on Monday. The 5-day exercise will bring together some 60 warplanes, including F-35As, at Cheongju Air Base to test the aircraft's tactical capabilities and improve the operational combat skills of Air Force personnel. These will utilize various scenarios, such as localized enemy provocations to full-scale warfare. The Space Operations Group that was newly established in June will be taking part in the drills, with spy and multi-purpose satellites detecting signs of enemy threats. The Air Force has been conducting the exercise twice a year since 2008. In other news, President Yoon Suk-yeol played host to his Malaysian counterpart, Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim, here in Seoul, and agreed to advance partnership in defense and critical minerals. Our Oh So-young covers their summit talks.
South Korea and Malaysia have formed a strategic partnership as their leaders on Monday agreed to strengthen cooperation in defense technology and core minerals. This came as President Yoon Suk-yeol and Malaysian Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim sat down for a bilateral summit at the Yongsan Presidential Office in Seoul.
Ahead of the 65th anniversary of diplomatic relations next year, the two sides agreed to establish a strategic partnership as they jointly pursue freedom, peace and prosperity in the Indo-Pacific region.
이를 계기로 양국 간 협력이 교역, 투자, 인적 교류를 넘어 국방, 방산, 그리고 그린 수소, 핵심 광물을 비롯한 미래 산업 분야로 확대되어 나아가기를 기대합니다.
First, Yoon and Anwar agreed to deepen political and security cooperation through regular dialogue at various levels between public bodies. To ramp up defense cooperation, the two sides will encourage industrial collaboration, with South Korea expected to start delivering light attack aircraft to Malaysia in 2026. They will also promote exchanges between defense authorities and collaborate on maritime security and law enforcement. On economic cooperation, the two sides will aim to conclude their free trade agreement negotiations by next year and focus on technological cooperation, particularly in fields such as artificial intelligence, the digital economy and green initiatives. They will further cooperate on infrastructure, such as in transportation and smart city development, as well as on green energy as they both pursue carbon neutrality. The two nations also agreed to sign a Memorandum of Understanding on critical minerals cooperation. Malaysia ranks 9th globally in rare earth minerals reserves. Yoon and Anwar touched upon furthering healthcare cooperation, as well as greater exchanges in tourism and education. They also discussed regional and global issues of mutual concern, with the two leaders both condemning North Korea's ballistic missile launches. They called for the complete, verifiable and irreversible dismantlement of Pyongyang's nuclear and missile programs and expressed concerns over its military cooperation with Russia. Yoon and Ibrahim affirmed their support for Malaysia chairing the Association of Southeast Asian Nations and South Korea hosting the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit next year. Oh So-young, Arirang News.
In Japan, Korean government officials and family members of the forced labor victims at the Sado mine held their own memorial ceremony on Monday to remember their sufferings after boycotting one organized by Japan. Our Pei Eun-ji has this report.
Wearing dark suits, South Korean officials and families of Koreans forced to work in the Sado mines held a memorial service on Monday morning for those forced laborers. This comes a day after South Korea announced that it would not attend a memorial ceremony organized by Japan, saying it had been impossible to settle disagreements between the two governments.
I sincerely hope that today serves as a day of remembrance for all the Korean laborers who had to endure unspeakable suffering under harsh conditions, and that this memorial ceremony brings at least a small measure of comfort to the hearts of the deceased laborers and their bereaved families.
The gold mines on Sado Island off the west coast of Japan are where at least 1,500 Koreans were forced to labor during Japan's colonial rule from 1910 to 1945. The place has long been a center of historical tensions between Seoul and Tokyo. In July, Japan managed to register the controversial gold mines as a UNESCO World Heritage Site after it promised to reflect the mines' full history, including the abuse of Korean laborers. Upon listing, Japan promised to hold memorial services at the site annually to remember all the laborers who had to work at the Sado Island gold mines. After months of negotiation, the two countries agreed to hold their first such memorial on Sunday, before South Korea suddenly announced that it was boycotting the event. Seats reserved for South Korean guests remained empty during Sunday's memorial service, as Japanese officials paid tribute to the victims. Japan's parliamentary vice minister Akiko Ikuina, who was at the event to represent the Japanese government, acknowledged that many Koreans worked under dangerous conditions, but made no mention of how Koreans were forced to work under such brutal conditions, and did not issue an apology.
These laborers from the Korean peninsula, although they were in a unique social situation due to the war, worked under dangerous and harsh conditions in the mines here, far from their homeland, while thinking of their beloved families.
There has been speculation that the South Korean boycott may happen because of Ikuina's past visit to Tokyo's controversial Yasukuni Shrine, a symbol of Japan's past militarism. The Japanese government showed disappointment over South Korea's decision to not attend the event.
As a local resident, I must say that it is truly very disappointing that despite the preparations being made, this is the outcome.
배은지, Arirang News.
Opposition leader Lee Jae-myung has been found not guilty of subornation of perjury. The Seoul Central District Court acquitted Lee on this Monday, announcing that the evidence brought against him by the prosecution was insufficient to prove that he had persuaded a former mayoral secretary to commit perjury. Lee had been accused of encouraging the secretary to share false testimony in a 2018 election law violation case against him. The latest verdict follows a guilty ruling 10 days ago for a separate election law violation that now has him appealing the one-year prison sentence suspended for 2 years. Shifting gears, the 29th UN Climate Change Conference finally came to a close on Sunday after it was due to wrap up on Friday. Developed countries adopted a 3 times higher global financing target to help poorer nations overcome climate change, but developing countries call it insufficient. Cha Yun-kyung has more.
The UN COP29 climate summit in Baku finally finished on Sunday, more than a day after it was due to, after there were big differences on opinion on financing between developed and developing countries. Developed nations at the summit adopted a $300 billion a year global target, which was 3 times higher than the amount agreed to in 2009 to help poorer nations cope with the impacts of climate change. They evaluated the agreement as a significant financing package.
These are always very hard negotiations, but I think by anyone's standards, this is a very significant financial package that has been agreed.
The developing nations, on the other hand, are complaining that the financing they will receive is a paltry sum, and even a joke, blaming the developed countries for this.
I'm disappointed. It's definitely below the benchmark that we have been fighting for so long. We were demanding 1.3 trillion, once again, 1% of global GDP. What we got was 300 billion.
Independent global campaigning network Greenpeace also criticized COP29, saying negotiations on cutting emissions saw little progress. United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres said some disagreements had to be overcome to reach a historic climate change financing deal. Meanwhile, reaching an agreement on carbon markets has become a key achievement for COP29 after nearly a decade of work under the Paris Agreement, making country-to-country trading and a carbon crediting mechanism fully operational. The 2025 UN Climate Change Conference will convene in November 2025 in Belém, Brazil. 차윤경, Arirang News.
In the southeastern port city of Busan, talks to hammer out a treaty against plastic pollution within the UN framework is underway as pundits raise the alarm over its consequences, while the public calls for tangible action. Our An Song-jin was there.
220 million tons. This is how much plastic waste the United Nations Environmental Program estimates that the world produced in 2024. That's an average of 28 kilograms per person. From biodiversity loss to eventually harming human health, plastic pollution has become a pressing issue. That's why delegates from over 170 countries have gathered for the fifth and final round of the International Negotiating Committee. Previously held in Uruguay, France, Kenya, and Canada, the committee has made its final stop in Busan, South Korea, in hopes of settling on a strong treaty. In accordance with the aims of the committee's final stage, the Busan metropolitan government hosted events that promote awareness of the reduction and recycling of plastic.
Korea has an advanced system in terms of processing waste. The fact that it is being held in Busan is symbolic, not only because we are the maritime capital of Northeast Asia, but also because we are working on resource circulation and policies to further promote this.
It offers activities like making items out of recycled plastic and other ways that plastic can be put into effective use every day.
I'm interested in environmental issues, so it was meaningful for me to participate in these activities.
Ahead of the global treaty talks, hundreds of citizens also gathered to voice their demands.
I'm hoping that our country will pay closer attention to the voices of the citizens in order to collaborate on this global treaty.
What these people behind me are marching for isn't much. They're asking governments to sign and implement a strong and effective legally binding agreement to end plastic pollution.
Most carbon emissions from plastics come from the production processes, and recycling isn't enough.
And we're demanding that our political leaders step up and show the courage to take bold action. Well, you know, the plastic pollution crisis is affecting every single one of us on the planet, but unfortunately there's a handful of corporations that are dictating the terms of the health of future generations.
From citizens to national delegates, there are multiple stakeholders reaching for the same goal, the reduction of plastic. Reaching a consensus for a single global treaty may be difficult, but continuous efforts are necessary in our everyday lives. An Song-jin, Arirang News, Busan.
K-pop boy band ATEEZ has topped the Billboard 200 albums chart with its 11th EP, Golden Hour Part 2. This is the second time the team has done so after clinching the spot for the first time last year. ATEEZ is now the third boy band that has had at least 2 albums hit #1 on the Billboard 200, following BTS and Stray Kids. Also on the recent ranking, BTS member Jin and boy band ENHYPEN stand within the top 10, marking the first time that 3 K-pop albums are on the top 10 list at the same time. Time now to take a look at what's been happening in the world of sports. Joining us here in the studio is our sports editor, Paul Neith. Hello, Paul.
Evening.
Let's start with football. The regular K-League season ended over the weekend.
Yes, you're right, and a lot had already been decided. Ulsan, the champions, and Incheon relegated, but there were also the AFC Champions League spots and the relegation playoff brackets still to be decided. Gangwon FC beat Pohang Steelers 1-0 on Saturday to secure second place, their best ever finish, and a place in the Champions League elite. Gimcheon lost 3-1 to FC Seoul to finish third, but still recorded a best ever finish for any Army team in the K-League. FC Seoul sealed fourth for a potential spot in the ACL. But at the bottom end of the table, Daegu FC on Sunday lost 3-1 to Incheon to finish in 11th. Jeonbuk drew 1-1 with Gwangju to end the campaign in 10th. This means that Daegu will face Cheongdam Asan in the playoffs later this week, and Jeonbuk will face Seoul Eland over 2 legs. The winners will have a place in K-League 1 next season, the losers in K-League 2.
Now over in Premier League, Son Heung-min helped Tottenham earn a big win also over the weekend.
Yes, that's right. Son got an assist in Tottenham's 4-0 win away to Manchester City. Son teed up James Maddison on 20 minutes to make it 2-0. It was his 4th assist of the season and 2nd this month. The win moved Spurs up to 6th place, just 4 points behind City. Meanwhile, Son is set to be joined at Spurs by Yang Min-hyuk a month earlier than planned in order for Yang to get used to his new surroundings before being able to play for Spurs in the new year. Yang, who scored the winner for Gangwon on Saturday, said in an interview after the match that he'll join Spurs on December the 16th. The 18-year-old is an MVP nominee for Friday's awards, having ended the season with 12 goals and 6 assists.
And speaking of awards, the KBO has announced some of the winners this year.
Yes, and some also won last year as well. For infielders, they were the Kium Heroes second baseman Kim Hye-sung, Kia Tigers shortstop Park Chan-ho, and third baseman Hyo Kyung-min of the Busan Bears. First base Austin Dean of the LG Twins also won one of the defensive awards. This follows Sunday's announcement that NC Dinos starter Kyle Hart won the pitching award, and Guillermo Heredia of the SSG Landers, Hong Chang-gi of the LG Twins, and Jong Soo-bin of the Busan Bears all won outfielder awards. The MVP and top rookie awards will be announced on a Tuesday at the league's awards ceremony. Third baseman Kim Do-young of the Kia Tigers is seen as favourite for MVP, and Busan Bears closer Kim Tak-yeon for a rookie.
And finally to badminton, An Se-young has shown why she's world #1.
Absolutely, yes. She won the 2024 BWF World Tour Super 750 Masters held in Shenzhen. In the final on Sunday, An beat China's Gao Fangjie 2-0, 21-12 and 21-8. It's An's first international title since winning gold at the Paris Olympics and her 5th gold medal this season, bouncing back from an early exit at the Denmark Open last month. She took some time off to recover after the Olympics from injury and had earlier spoken out about the Korea Badminton Association's player management and training methods.
Thanks for the wrap-up, Paul. See you next week.
Thank you.
The last mild autumn weather continued throughout the day. Starting with the west coast and Jeju Island tonight, the rain will expand to other parts of the country overnight. As for the amount of rainfall, up to 100 millimeters of heavy rain is forecast in the mountainous areas of Jeju Island, 20 to 60 on the south coast, and 10 to 40 in southern inland areas and central parts of the country. With heavy rain, strong winds are also expected. Therefore, preliminary warnings of strong winds are in place for coastal areas, the Jeollado provinces, Chungcheongnam-do province, and the Gyeongsang-do provinces. Gusty winds of more than 20 meters per second will blow on the west coast and south coast tonight and expand across the country tomorrow. Please take extra precautions. Morning will start off at 10 degrees Celsius in Daejeon, Gwangju, Daegu, and Gyeongju. Daily highs will move up to at least 10 degrees nationwide. The first snow is expected in inland areas, including Seoul, this Wednesday. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
That is Newscenter for tonight. Thank you for watching. A panel session up next.